Christian views on alcohol are varied. Throughout the first 1,800 years of church history, Christians generally consumed alcoholic beverages as a common part of everyday life and used the fruit of the vine in the central rite, the Eucharist, the Lord's Supper. They held that both the Bible and Christian tradition taught that alcohol is a gift from God that makes life more joyous, but that overindulgence leading to drunkenness is sinful, or at least a vice. In the mid-19th century, some Protestant Christians moved from a position of allowing moderate use of alcohol to either deciding that not imbibing was wisest in the present circumstances, or prohibiting all ordinary consumption of alcohol because it was believed to be a sin. Many evangelical churches, particularly the Methodists, advocated abstentionism and were early leaders in the temperance movement of the 19th and 20th centuries. Today, all three of these positions exist in Christianity, but the historic position remains the most common worldwide, due to the adherence by the largest bodies of Christians, namely Anglicanism, Roman Catholicism, and Orthodoxy. Alcohol in the Bible. Alcoholic beverages appear in the Bible, both in usage and in poetic expression. The Bible is ambivalent toward alcohol, considering it both a blessing from God that brings merriment and a potential danger that can be unwisely and sinfully abused. Christian views on alcohol come from what the Bible says about it, along with Jewish and Christian traditions. The biblical languages have several words for alcoholic beverages, and though prohibitionists and some abstentionists dissent, there is a broad consensus that the words did ordinarily refer to intoxicating drinks. The commonness and centrality of wine in daily life in biblical times is apparent from its many positive and negative metaphorical uses throughout the Bible. Positively, for example, wine is used as a symbol of abundance and of physical blessing. Negatively, wine is personified as a mocker and beer a brawler, and drinking a cup of strong wine to the dregs and getting drunk are sometimes presented as a symbol of God's judgment and wrath. The Bible also speaks of wine in general terms as a bringer and concomitant of joy, particularly in the context of nourishment and feasting. Wine was commonly drunk at meals, and the Old Testament prescribed it for use in sacrificial rituals and festal celebrations. The Gospel of John recorded the first miracle of Jesus making copious amounts of wine at the wedding feast at Cana. Jesus instituted the ritual of the Eucharist at the Last Supper during a Passover celebration. He says that the fruit of the vine is a new covenant in blood. Though Christians have differed on the implications of this statement, alcohol was also used for medicinal purposes in biblical times, and it appears in that context in several passages as an oral anesthetic, a topical cleanser and soother, and a digestive aid. Kings and priests in the Old Testament were forbidden to partake of wine at various times. John the Baptist was a Nazirite from birth. Nazirite vows excluded not only wine, but also vinegar, grapes, and raisins. Jesus evidently did not take such a vow during the 3 years of ministry depicted in the Gospels, but in fact was even accused by the Pharisees of eating and drinking with sinners. St. Paul further instructs Christians regarding their duty toward immature Christians. It is better not to eat meat, to drink wine, or to do anything else that will cause your brother to fall. Even today, priests may not bless the congregation after having even a single glass of wine. Virtually all Christian traditions hold that the Bible condemns ordinary drunkenness in many passages, and Easton's Bible Dictionary says, the sin of drunkenness must have been not uncommon in the olden times, for it is mentioned either metaphorically or literally more than 70 times in the Bible. Quote, additionally, the consequences of the drunkenness of Noah and Lot were intended to serve as examples of the dangers and repulsiveness of intemperance. St. Paul later chides the Corinthians for becoming drunk on wine served at their attempted celebrations of the Eucharist. Winemaking in biblical times. Both the climate and land of Palestine, where most of the Bible takes place, were well suited to growing grapes, and the wine that the vineyards produced was a valued commodity in ancient times, both for local consumption and for its value in trade. Trade with Egypt was quite extensive. Jews were a wine-drinking culture well before the foundation of Rome. Vintage wines were found in the tomb of King Scorpion in Hierakonpolis. Archaeological evidence suggests that Semitic predecessors were thought to be responsible for the vintages that were found in the tomb. Vineyards were protected from robbers and animals by walls, hedges, and manned watchtowers. In Hebrew, grape juice need not ferment before it is called wine. When the grapes have been crushed and the wine begins to flow, even though it has not descended into the cistern and is still in the wine press. The harvest time brought much joy and play, as women and children took to the vineyard, often accompanied by the sound of music and song, from late August to September to bring in the grapes. Some grapes were eaten immediately, while others were turned into raisins. Most of them, however, were put into the wine press where the men and boys trampled them, often to music. The fermentation process started within 6 to 12 hours after pressing, and the must was usually left in the collection vat for a few days to allow the initial, tumultuous stage of fermentation to pass. The winemakers soon transferred it either into large earthenware jars, which were then sealed, or, if the wine were to be transported elsewhere, into wineskins. After 6 weeks, fermentation was complete, and the wine was filtered into larger containers and either sold for consumption or stored in a cellar of cistern, lasting for 3 to 4 years. Even after a year of aging, the vintage was still called new wine, and more aged wines were preferred. Spices and scents were often added to wine in order to hide defects that arose from storage that was often not sufficient to prevent all spoiling. One might expect about 10% of any given cellar of wine to have been ruined completely. But vinegar was also created intentionally for dipping bread, among other uses. The Feast of Booths was a prescribed holiday that immediately followed the harvest and pressing of the grapes.